At 2 p.m., I ran into my teacher at a coffee shop. She reeked of alcohol and suddenly grabbed my arm, pulling me toward her apartment. When I tried to pull away, she pressed herself against me and whispered, "Come on, don't be such a baby." I stayed silent in that moment, but it was the last time I ever let anyone silence me again. When Ms. Khalifa was dismissed from her position, Kyle became the most unpopular student at our all-boys school because he was the one who reported her. Ms. Khalifa, at 23, seemed to embody every adolescent boy's ideal. She had long, dark hair, incredibly long legs, and a way of leaning over desks that made even the brightest students forget basic arithmetic. Then Kyle had to come along and spoil everything. The day after she was escorted out by security, my friend Lucas pulled me aside. "Steer clear of Kyle. That envious virgin fabricated stories because she wouldn't give him any attention." The entire cafeteria fell into a stunned silence when Kyle entered, the kind of awkward quiet where everyone wonders, did he catch me pleasuring myself in the restroom? Someone hurled a milk carton at his head, and everyone erupted in laughter. Kyle simply wiped the milk from his face and sat by himself, offering no resistance. He just unwrapped his sandwich as if his entire social standing hadn't just been shattered. Over the next few weeks, I observed Kyle's life transform into a living nightmare. Someone spray-painted snitch across his locker. Groups of boys would corner him between classes, pushing him against walls. They would recount tales of Ms. Khalifa, then glare at Kyle as if he had personally canceled Christmas. "Remember when she wore that crimson dress?" they would ask. Now we're stuck with Mrs. Henderson, who appears to be literally decaying. But here's what didn't make sense. Despite everyone treating him like an outcast, Kyle continued to arrive early, tutoring 7th graders. When Brad Thompson attempted to confront him, Kyle simply stated, "You don't comprehend what she truly was," and walked away. Everything changed when I received an email from Ms. Khalifa. My very essence seemed to leave my body when I saw her name. She claimed she missed her special students and wished to meet up, even providing her phone number. I immediately showed Lucas and the others at lunch. They practically lifted me up as if I had discovered fire. "You're the chosen one, man," Lucas exclaimed, patting my back. "Don't mess this up for us." I messaged her that evening, and we arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown on Saturday. When I arrived, she looked even more stunning than I remembered. She embraced me, and I swear I felt myself ascend. She commented that I seemed more mature. The first 20 minutes were everything I had fantasized about. She chuckled at my jokes, repeatedly touching my arm. Then things rapidly took a strange turn. She suggested we go to her apartment. When I hesitated, she seized my hand and began pulling me toward the exit. "Come on, don't be such a wimp." Her grasp was actually painful. I tried to pull away, but she adopted an expression that made my stomach churn. "What's wrong? Isn't this what you desired?" She was pressing against me, and I could detect the scent of alcohol on her breath at 2 in the afternoon. That's when Kyle materialized out of nowhere. He seized my other arm and yanked me away. "We're leaving now." He dragged me to his parents' restaurant next door and drove me home without much conversation. I made the error of telling Lucas what had transpired. His face contorted, and he began to laugh. That cruel laugh that forces you to reconsider your friendship. "You seriously chickened out and let Kyle cockblock you?" By Monday, the entire school had heard Lucas's version, where I was too terrified, and Kyle had ruined it because he was envious. Even when I attempted to explain that she was being aggressive and frightening, they merely called me a gay little expletive. I approached Principal Morrison, but he barely glanced up from his computer. "Ms. Khalifa is no longer employed here. Stop creating drama." That afternoon, I witnessed 6 seniors corner Kyle by the gymnasium, yelling at him for ruining another opportunity for everyone. 2 days later, everything escalated dramatically. Someone created a fake Grindr profile using Kyle's photos and printed hundreds of explicit screenshots. They were everywhere, taped inside bathroom stalls, stuffed into locker vents. The worst ones were photoshopped with Kyle's face engaged in unspeakable acts. His parents owned a small Filipino restaurant downtown, and people taped the photos all over their windows. I saw a video in the group chat of Kyle attempting to tear down the photos while crying, with people merely filming and laughing. No one offered assistance. I found Kyle at his house 3 days later. His family was packing boxes as if evacuating before a catastrophe. His mother answered the door with the reddest eyes I had ever seen and simply gestured upstairs. Kyle was seated on his bedroom floor, surrounded by boxes. When he saw me, he shook his head. "We're relocating to my aunt's place in Colorado." He fell silent for so long I thought he had drifted off to sleep. I was 12 when she started paying attention to me. 12. She knew my parents were divorcing. Knew I was failing English. He showed me screenshots of other boys she was messaging from nearby schools. She wasn't fired for one incident. I spent months collecting evidence. My little sister won't even look at me because of what her classmates told her. His voice cracked. He handed me a flash drive. Give this to the police. Perhaps they'll do something when it's not just my word. I sat in my car outside Kyle's house for 20 minutes, just staring at the flash drive. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. The weight of what Kyle had confided in me pressed down on my chest like concrete. 12 years old. She had targeted him when he was 12. I pulled out my phone and messaged Lucas. We need to talk. Through Kyle's bedroom window, I could see him watching me from behind the curtain. He gave a small wave before vanishing. Lucas responded immediately with a string of laughing emojis, followed by, "Did the expletive try to convert you two?" My stomach churned. I shoved the phone into my pocket and began driving toward the police station. The flash drive felt like it was scorching a hole through my jeans pocket. Every red light made me want to scream. I kept seeing Kyle's face when he spoke about his little sister no longer looking at him. The police station smelled of stale coffee and disappointment. The desk sergeant barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle when I approached. I placed the flash drive on the counter and explained it contained evidence about a teacher who had been inappropriate with students. He picked it up as if it were a used tissue, turned it over once, then slid it back to me. The detective who handles these matters won't be back until Monday. Perhaps you should file a report online instead. He returned to his puzzle before I could respond. I drove home in a daze. The flash drive felt heavier now, as if it contained the burden of every child Ms. Khalifa had harmed. When I pulled into our driveway, my mom was already standing on the porch with her arms crossed. That posture signaled trouble. She began speaking before I even exited the car. The school had emailed her about Kyle and me harassing staff with wild accusations about Ms. Rodriguez. I tried to correct her that it was Ms. Khalifa, but she wasn't listening. She waved a printed email in my face. The school counselor had expressed concern about my fixation on the terminated teacher and my inappropriate involvement with troubled student Kyle. The words blurred together as I read. They made it sound like I was the problem, like Kyle was the problem, not the 23-year-old woman who had been grooming children. My mom demanded answers, but I couldn't find the words. How could I explain what I didn't fully comprehend myself? I made a choice that would haunt me. I lied, told her it was all a misunderstanding, that I would drop it. She studied my face for a long moment before going inside. Through the kitchen window, I watched her pick up the phone. She was calling the school counselor about my concerning behavior with troubled students. I could hear snippets of the conversation through the screen door. Yes, he's been acting strange. No, I had no idea about Kyle. Of course, I'll monitor the situation. My phone vibrated 3 times in quick succession. Lucas had sent a link to a new meme page dedicated to Kyle. The images made me want to hurl my phone against the wall. The second message was from Kyle. Just 3 words and a letter. You okay? K. The third made my blood run cold. Ms. Khalifa asking, everything okay, sweetie? With a heart emoji. My hands trembled as I stared at her message. I needed to maintain my cover. Needed her to believe I was still interested, so I responded with a casual, yeah, I just got home. The typing indicator appeared immediately. She was composing something lengthy. The dots appeared and vanished several times as if she were editing her message. My anxiety surged with each passing second. Finally, the paragraph arrived. She was concerned about me associating with disturbed individuals. Some boys misinterpret attention and project their issues onto others. She hoped I wasn't being influenced by negative people. My 13-year-old brother appeared in my doorway. His friends were saying I was obsessed with that teacher who got fired. He wanted to know if it was true. The confusion and disappointment in his eyes struck harder than any of Lucas's insults. I told him it was complicated, and he rolled his eyes. Everything was complicated with me lately, apparently. He stomped back to his room and slammed the door. I locked my bedroom door and plugged in a flash drive. My laptop took an eternity to boot up. When the folders finally loaded, my heart stopped. There was one labeled Others. Inside were screenshots of conversations with 3 different boys. One name immediately stood out, David Chen from the honor roll, the kid who had won the state science fair last year. The messages began the same way mine had. Compliments about being special, mature, different from other boys. Then escalating to meetings outside school. The next morning, I attempted a different approach. The school required parent signatures for security footage requests. I practiced my mom's signature 50 times before driving to school. The front desk lady, Mrs. Patterson, had known me since freshman year. She barely glanced at the form before her eyes narrowed. She held it up to the light, as if checking for counterfeit money. This doesn't look like your mother's signature. Did you really think you could forge documents? She kept the form and said she would be calling my parents. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I answered, a woman identified herself as M. Johnson, a teacher friend of Ms. Khalifa's. She still had access to the grade book and wanted me to know what kind of student I really was. Problem students like me always try to blame others for their failures. She had documentation of every missing assignment, every failed test. The call ended before I could respond. My failed freshman year was returning to destroy me. Mom was waiting in the living room when I got home. She had that look that signified a long conversation was imminent. Remember when you thought Mr. Davis was out to get you? This was just like freshman year all over again. I had experienced a breakdown then, convinced my English teacher was sabotaging me. It turned out I simply wasn't submitting assignments. Was this another episode? Was I having another breakdown? The concern in her voice was tinged with exhaustion. She was weary of my drama. That evening, someone posted an Instagram story of me at the police station. Within an hour, it had been screenshotted and reframed. Local boy stalks innocent teacher after she rejected advances. The caption made me sound like a predator. Comments flooded in about how I had always been weird, always staring at Ms. Khalifa in class. People who had never spoken to me suddenly had stories about my creepy behavior. The narrative was being rewritten in real time. I attempted to gather witness statements the next day. Every teacher I approached gave me the same warning. Stop harassing staff regarding terminated employees. Mr. Brooks threatened to call security if I didn't leave his classroom. Ms. Anderson said she would be reporting my behavior to the principal. Even Mr. Garcia, who had always been cool, shook his head and told me to let it go. The wall of silence was absolute. My phone lit up with a notification from an unknown Instagram account. Ms. Khalifa had created a backup profile and was sharing screenshots, emails I had sent her asking for extra help last year. They looked different out of context, desperate, obsessive. One included a note from the counselor recommending therapy for my adjustment issues. She had saved everything, awaiting the opportune moment to deploy it. The caption read, "Some boys can't handle rejection," with a broken heart emoji. 3 hours of sleep left me dizzy and disoriented. I was attempting to send Kyle evidence that Ms. Khalifa was building a case against us. My finger slipped, and I sent the screenshot to the wrong group chat, the one with Lucas and the guys. I deleted it immediately, but Brad had already screenshotted it. Too late, bro. Already saved. Within minutes, everyone knew I had evidence about Ms. Khalifa. The speculation began immediately. Was I trying to blackmail her? Was this why she rejected me? Marcus found me after school. We had been best friends since middle school. His parents had forbidden him from associating with me anymore. Lucas had told them things about my obsession, about the police station, about how I was stalking an innocent woman. Marcus looked genuinely apologetic. His scholarship depended on staying out of trouble. He couldn't risk it. He walked away, and I knew our friendship was over, another casualty in a conflict nobody else understood. The whispers began that week. Parents picking up their children would cease talking when they saw me, subtly pointing. That's the boy who's obsessed with Ms. K. Some pulled their sons away as if I were contagious. The narrative had spread beyond the school. I was becoming a pariah in my own community, the first indications of the complete social destruction that was approaching. Nobody desired the full story. They had already decided who the villain was. Kyle messaged me that night. Ms. Khalifa claimed she was at a teaching conference during one of the incidents he had reported. He had mixed up the dates. She actually had been away that weekend. It was a minor error, but it would demolish his credibility if it came out. One mistake in months of evidence, and everything would unravel. I told him it didn't matter, that we had enough other proof, but doubt was creeping in. What else had he gotten wrong? My college recommendation letters were due soon. The guidance counselor pulled me aside. I would need to explain the gap where Ms. Khalifa's evaluation should have been. It would appear suspicious to admissions committees, a student who couldn't maintain appropriate relationships with teachers. The underlying message was clear. I was being marked as a problematic student. My future was being undermined by her absence as much as her presence had harmed Kyle's past. I made a desperate decision that night. My sister was a senior student council president, with a perfect record. She possessed a key card that granted access to the school after hours. I pleaded with her for assistance. She saw the desperation in my eyes and relented, just this once. If I got caught, she would never forgive me. I promised I just needed to verify something. She handed over the card with a warning. This was the only time she could help. Her position mattered too much. The school felt different in the darkness. Every shadow seemed to conceal security. I reached the records room and located what I was searching for. Logs showing Ms. Khalifa's key card accessing the building at times. She claimed she wasn't there. I took photos with my phone, my hands trembling. When security reviewed the logs later, they would see my sister's card used after hours. I would appear like a stalker breaking in. The trap was closing around me. The next morning brought a small triumph. The police finally accepted the flash drive. The desk sergeant from before was absent. A younger officer actually listened, took notes, and stated they would investigate. Kyle and I exchanged relieved messages. Perhaps something would finally happen. We met briefly at the park to celebrate. Someone saw us together. By lunch, the story had morphed. We were conspiring together again, two obsessed boys validating each other's delusions. The certified letter arrived that afternoon. Ms. Khalifa was filing a restraining order against me. The court date was set. I would have to face her again, this time before a judge. The grocery store parking lot was crowded that Saturday morning. I had gone with my mom to assist with shopping, attempting to act normal despite the restraining order paperwork burning in my backpack. Ms. Khalifa appeared near the produce section, conversing with Lucas's mother as if they were old friends. My stomach plummeted as I watched her lean in, touching Mrs. Martinez's arm while gesturing toward Lucas's younger brother. She mentioned something about struggling students and extra help. Mrs. Martinez's face lit up with gratitude. I ducked behind a display, but Ms. Khalifa had already noticed me. Her eyes widened in feigned surprise before she grabbed Mrs. Martinez's arm, pointing in my direction. I couldn't hear the words, but watched Mrs. Martinez's expression shift from friendly to concerned. She pulled her younger son closer, while Ms. Khalifa shook her head sadly. By the time they finished talking, Mrs. Martinez was nodding sympathetically and exchanging phone numbers with her. The court hearing arrived sooner than anticipated. I sat in the waiting area, my inexpensive suit feeling too constricting around my neck. Ms. Khalifa arrived looking professional and vulnerable in a modest dress, tissues already in hand. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, whispered instructions while casting disapproving glances my way. My parents sat behind me, their disappointment radiating like heat. Inside the courtroom, both sides presented their accounts. I explained about the coffee shop incident, how she had grabbed me, the alcohol on her breath. My voice quivered as I described feeling trapped. Ms. Khalifa's lawyer countered with a different narrative, a troubled student with a history of mental health issues who developed an unhealthy fixation. A young teacher attempting to help who had been rewarded with stalking and harassment after her termination. The evidence phase devastated me. Brad had submitted screenshots from our group chat. Messages I had sent months ago appeared on the courtroom screen. Comments about Ms. Khalifa being hot enough to die for. Jokes about what I would do if given the chance. Crude teenage boy humor that now appeared as obsession. My lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The judge's expression had already shifted from neutral to skeptical. Ms. Khalifa took the stand, dabbing at her eyes. She described feeling unsafe, being followed, receiving unwanted contact. She produced the text I had sent saying I was home, claiming it proved I was tracking her movements. The Instagram story from the police station became evidence of stalking. Every interaction was reframed through the lens of an unstable student pursuing an innocent teacher. The judge's ruling descended like a hammer. My claims of assault were dismissed as a teenage fantasy gone awry. The restraining order was granted. 500 feet minimum distance, no contact through third parties. Any violation would result in criminal charges. I sat frozen as the judge lectured me about respecting boundaries and seeking appropriate help for my issues. That night, I found myself at a different grocery store across town. My brother needed poster board for a school project, and Mom refused to go anywhere Ms. Khalifa might be. While searching for supplies, I overheard two moms from his school talking. That nice young teacher who had been helping with math tutoring. So sweet to volunteer her time after being falsely accused. My brother later mentioned the lady who knew me had given him candy after tutoring. She had inquired about our family, seemed genuinely interested in how I was doing. The doorbell camera notification arrived at 3 in the morning. I watched the footage on my phone. Ms. Khalifa's figure approaching our front door in the darkness. She left an envelope, looked directly at the camera, then walked away. My dad retrieved it the next morning. A letter expressing concern about my well-being, hoping my parents would get me the help I needed. Professional stationery, perfect grammar, the image of a caring educator. What the camera also captured was me watching from my bedroom window, another piece of evidence that I was the one obsessed. Kyle's password hint resurfaced during a particularly sleepless night, something he had mentioned during the car ride home. His mother's maiden name plus his old apartment number. I attempted various combinations on the chat platform Ms. Khalifa had used. Success came on the 15th attempt. The archived conversations loaded slowly, hundreds of messages spanning months. The final one sent chills down my spine. She had asked if he was alone. The timestamp was 30 minutes before she had been fired. School became intolerable. Someone had created a Pinterest board titled Healing from False Accusations, and Ms. Khalifa had shared it. Teachers from across the district were commenting with support. The narrative had spread beyond our school. She was becoming a symbol of young educators persecuted by disturbed students. Local teacher Facebook groups shared her story as a cautionary tale. The comments section filled with sympathy and outrage. My therapist appointment had been scheduled months ago for general anxiety. Now it became evidence. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday. All session notes related to romantic fixations and difficulty accepting rejection would be reviewed. Dr. Martinez looked apologetic as she explained she had no choice. Professional ethics required compliance. My private struggles with social anxiety and a freshman-year crush on a senior girl would now be twisted into proof of a pattern. The grocery store incident occurred 2 weeks later. I had been documenting Ms. Khalifa's movements, attempting to establish patterns for evidence. She entered the store just as I was leaving. Instead of walking away, I pulled out my phone and followed at a distance. She noticed immediately, screaming that I was stalking her again. Security arrived within minutes. The footage showed exactly what it appeared to be, me following her through multiple aisles, phone in hand. My brother's school pickup became a daily ordeal. Ms. Khalifa's new tutoring center was situated directly on the route. Every day, I technically violated the restraining order just trying to get him home. I started making my mom do pickups, but she worked late twice a week. On those days, I would circle the long way, adding 20 minutes to avoid the building. Other parents noticed the peculiar routes, the way I would suddenly change direction if I saw her car. The janitor, Mr. Williams, had been at our school for 30 years. Kyle had mentioned him as a witness who had seen him leaving Ms. Khalifa's classroom crying. I tracked him down at his new job at the mall. He looked weary when I approached, immediately shaking his head. He had grandkids to consider. Couldn't afford to lose his pension over this mess. He had seen nothing, heard nothing, and wished to keep it that way. Another door slammed shut. Something peculiar caught my eye at the next court appearance. Ms. Khalifa was wearing a physics team jacket identical to Kyle's. Same color, same patches, even the same wear pattern on the sleeves. Either she had purchased one exactly like his, or had one custom-made. The level of obsession it demonstrated made my skin crawl, but pointing it out would make me appear even more unstable. Who notices such details except someone truly obsessed? Her lawyer made an offer during recess. Drop everything, publicly admit that Kyle had manipulated me, apologize for the harassment. In exchange, she would drop the criminal charges she was preparing. The deal had an expiration date, 24 hours to decide, accept, and salvage what remained of my future, or refuse, and face complete destruction. The choice was presented as obvious. Only someone choosing sick obsession over sanity would refuse. I refused. The reaction was immediate. New narratives spread about my inability to let go, my choice to destroy my own life rather than admit the truth. Even my parents questioned the decision. Why not just apologize and move on? Why protect Kyle when he'd already left town? The isolation deepened. I was now the boy who chose delusion over redemption. Kyle called that night, his voice trembling. He had been reviewing his evidence and discovered an error. The library incident he had reported happened on a different day than he had claimed. Security footage would prove him wrong about the date. But when I suggested checking the correct date, we unearthed something worse. The actual day showed an even more serious incident. His timeline error had accidentally uncovered darker evidence. The cloud backup revelation came during another late-night call. Kyle hadn't just given me the only copy of evidence. He had uploaded everything to multiple secure accounts before handing over the flash drive. Even if something happened to the physical evidence, copies existed. He gave me access to one account, a backup plan in case things went wrong. Smart kid, traumatized, but strategic. My supposed proof began to crumble under scrutiny. The most damaging revelation came from Ms. Khalifa's lawyer. What I had interpreted as grooming messages about Kyle were actually her helping him with a legitimate college essay about his parents' divorce. Context destroyed perception. Each piece of evidence could be explained away. A caring teacher helping a struggling student. Nothing more. My sister found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m, stress-eating cereal. She sat down without a word, sliding her phone across the table. She had been monitoring school social media, screenshotting conversations about me, teachers discussing my deteriorating behavior, parents warning each other, students creating memes. She couldn't risk more than this passive help. Her position as student council president, her college applications, everything hung in the balance. She had already done more than she should by giving me the key card. The manipulation tactics I learned from observing Ms. Khalifa proved useful. I started attending the same yoga class as the mother of a boy in her new tutoring program. Casual conversations about kids and school, slowly building trust, planting seeds of concern without appearing obvious. The woman mentioned her son had been acting differently since starting tutoring, more secretive. I suggested she check his phone just to be safe. The seed was planted. Coffee shop encounters could be coincidences. Running into Ms. Khalifa's roommate at the local cafe seemed natural enough. Discussions about the weather and complaints about rent prices. She mentioned Ms. Khalifa had been staying out late recently, coming home emotional. Different guys picking her up. The roommate seemed concerned, but not suspicious. I memorized every detail while maintaining a mundane conversation about the weather. Social media became an unexpected ally. Ms. Khalifa couldn't help but overshare, even while claiming to be traumatized. Tagged locations on posts contradicted her court statements about feeling unsafe. Photos showed her at bars near my neighborhood when she claimed to be avoiding the area. Her public Pinterest boards revealed shopping habits in frequent locations, digital breadcrumbs leading to evidence. Kyle's father emerged from the divorce silence with explosive timing. He wanted to sue the school for millions, claiming they had failed to protect his son. His lawyer sent cease and desist letters to everyone involved. The criminal case ground to a halt as civil litigation threats flew. Kyle begged his dad to stop, but custody agreements meant he had no say. The money-hungry father was derailing everything. Fighting two battles meant sacrifices. The SAT registration deadline passed while I was gathering evidence. My guidance counselor marked it as poor planning skills in my file. Another mark against my character. College applications would show a student who couldn't manage basic responsibilities. The future I had worked toward crumbled while I fought for a truth nobody wanted to hear. Legal fees drained my parents' savings. Credit cards maxed out while Ms. Khalifa crowd-funded her defense. Teachers donated. Parents contributed. The narrative of a young educator destroyed by false accusations resonated. Meanwhile, my family argued about money over dinner. My brother couldn't have friends over because their parents didn't want them in our house. The boy who stalked a teacher lived here. The memorial service should have been neutral ground. A student had died in a car accident, and the entire school gathered to mourn. I sat in the back, far from Ms. Khalifa, but she noticed me and loudly expressed feeling unsafe with her stalker present. The grieving family, already overwhelmed, asked us both to leave. Another public scene where I appeared to be the aggressor. Even at a funeral, I couldn't escape the narrative. My tutoring job ended with a formal letter. Inability to maintain appropriate boundaries with students. The tutoring center couldn't risk having someone with my reputation working with minors. The replacement they hired came recommended by Ms. Khalifa's friend. Another door closed. Another connection to her world. The isolation was systematic and complete. Housing situations shifted like tectonic plates. My parents moved my bedroom to the basement, away from street-facing windows, less chance of me being seen watching the street. Meanwhile, Ms. Khalifa moved in with a new boyfriend who happened to live in Kyle's old neighborhood, the same streets where Kyle's family restaurant had been vandalized. The coincidence felt deliberate, as if she were claiming territory. My dad's breaking point arrived on a Thursday evening. He found me organizing evidence at 3 a.m, photos and timestamps spread across my bedroom floor. His voice cracked as he begged me to let it go before I destroyed our entire family. My brother couldn't have friends over anymore. Mom cried herself to sleep. The whispers at his office were growing louder. How much more could they endure? His words cut deep because they were true. Mr. Brooks became collateral damage in my investigation. I had approached him multiple times for witness statements despite warnings. The school launched an investigation into why he hadn't reported signs of inappropriate behavior if he had known. His pregnant wife confronted me in the parking lot, tears streaming. How could I do this to them? He was suspended pending review. Their income halved with a baby on the way. My pursuit of justice was destroying innocent lives. The Brooks family situation rapidly deteriorated. His wife blamed him for not protecting students, for not seeing the signs. If he had known enough to be questioned, why hadn't he acted? Their marriage strained under the weight of suspicion and financial pressure. Another family cracking under the pressure of my investigation. The guilt gnawed at me, but stopping meant letting Ms. Khalifa win. Even Kyle began to doubt. During a panic attack over a video call, he asked the question I had been dreading. What if we were wrong about some of it? What if some incidents were misinterpreted? The doubt in his voice was contagious. I couldn't answer immediately because I had wondered the same thing. How much was real? And how much had we convinced ourselves was true? But we had come too far to stop. Public admission became a necessary strategy. To maintain any credibility about the assault, I had to admit to following her, documenting her movements. Yes, I had technically stalked her, but only to gather evidence. The admission felt like swallowing glass, but it was the only way to keep the assault claim alive. I was trading my reputation for a chance at justice. The September message haunted me more than anything else. Kyle had reached out months before the final incident, a simple message saying she wouldn't leave him alone. I had seen it, read it, and done nothing. Marked as read with no response. I thought he was being dramatic, looking for attention. The evidence of my failure glowed on the screen. I could have helped earlier, but dismissed his cry for help. Emergency motions disrupted all timing. Ms. Khalifa's lawyer filed to move the trial up while Kyle was still in Colorado. My lawyer had food poisoning the day of the hearing. Everything aligned against us. The system seemed determined to protect her while punishing anyone who questioned the narrative. Each legal maneuver cost more money we didn't have. Understanding Ms. Khalifa's psychology became crucial. Through the messages and patterns, a picture emerged. She genuinely believed she had loved Kyle, that she was helping him through the divorce. The delusion ran deep. Her emails showed a desperate need for validation mixed with predatory targeting of vulnerable boys. She was unwell but self-aware enough to cover her tracks, a dangerous combination. Betrayal felt like acid in my throat. To prove the damage she had caused, I had to share Kyle's suicide attempt. The promise to never tell anyone shattered as I handed over hospital records. His privacy violated for the greater good. The old version of me who respected boundaries and kept secrets died that day. Strategic calculation replaced human decency. Kyle's private medical records appeared on my phone screen. Screenshots saved before he could change his mind about sharing, documentation of therapy sessions, medication adjustments, the full scope of trauma. Each image felt like another betrayal, but they were necessary. Without proof of damage, she would walk free. I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who would violate trust for evidence. Car surveillance provided the breakthrough. Ms. Khalifa claimed she was never at certain locations during specific times, but traffic cameras and parking applications told different stories. Her car appeared in time-stamped photos at locations she had denied visiting, building a pattern of lies. It took patience, but the evidence accumulated, digital footprints revealing truth despite her careful construction of alibis. Small victories felt hollow. The judge excluded some evidence, but allowed others. Each minor win came at a massive cost. Seeing Ms. Khalifa crying in the courthouse while I sat in a different corridor, both of us visibly destroyed by the process. We had become mutual destruction, two lives intertwined in the worst possible way. Neither of us would emerge whole. The defamation counterclaim gained traction with a weary judge who had seen too many cases. He questioned whether public statements about her behavior constituted lies. The legal quicksand deepened, fighting the original charges while defending against new ones. Each appearance cost money and dignity, the system grinding both accuser and accused into dust. Everything hinged on Kyle flying back to testify. His presence would make or break the case. Without his direct testimony, everything else was circumstantial. The tickets were booked. The date set. Both sides prepared for the confrontation that would determine everything. The countdown began to the moment when truth and falsehood would collide in open court. Past kindness became present leverage. I had tutored Ms. Khalifa's nephew the previous year, helping him pass algebra. Now the child approached me at the store asking why I was being mean to AmITheA. She had weaponized a child's gratitude. The boy's innocent question struck harder than any legal threat. Another relationship poisoned by her manipulation. Teachers chose sides based on politics rather than truth. Union representatives supported Ms. Khalifa. Those who controlled recommendation letters aligned with her narrative. Speaking out meant career suicide for any teacher. The few who privately expressed doubts publicly maintained silence. Professional survival trumped justice. The wall of institutional protection stood firm. Pattern requirements frustrated the prosecutor. Two victims weren't enough without physical evidence. The system needed more damaged children to take it seriously. The threshold for action remained frustratingly high. How many boys had to suffer before patterns became proof? The legal machinery moved slowly while predators adapted quickly. My grandfather's connection to the retired principal became the last card to play. Before his death, he had helped Principal Edwards through a difficult time. I called in the marker, invoking a dead man's favor. Edwards agreed to provide personnel files, but wouldn't testify. The compromise felt dirty, but necessary. Using my grandfather's memory for leverage violated everything he taught me about honor. The personnel file revealed what Kyle's parents had concealed. They had known about inappropriate contact, but stayed silent during their custody battle. Neither wanted the scandal affecting their case. Their son was sacrificed for their legal convenience. The documentation showed complaints filed then withdrawn, concerns raised then buried. Parents choosing personal battles over their child's safety. The personnel file contained something worse than Kyle's parents' silence. A handwritten note from a substitute teacher dated 3 years ago, describing Kyle leaving Ms. Khalifa's classroom in tears. The complaint had been filed, investigated, then mysteriously dropped. Kyle hadn't been her first target. He had been protecting others, even before he started collecting evidence. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That afternoon, Kyle's journal arrived by overnight mail. He had sent it before flying back, wanting me to understand everything. Page after page documented his methodical planning. He had known nobody would believe a 12-year-old, so he had waited, gathered proof, protected younger students while sacrificing his own childhood. One entry stood out. After graduation, I'll report everything. Until then, I watch and document. The weight of his sacrifice pressed down on me. Ms. Khalifa submitted her teaching portfolio for a district award the week before trial. My sister's friend worked at the district office and leaked me a copy. The portfolio contained reflections on forming special connections with struggling students. Kyle's name appeared multiple times. She had written about helping him through his parents' divorce, about their unique bond. Her own words contradicted every claim of professional distance. The prosecutor finally understood the pattern. After reviewing everything, 2 victims plus the portfolio plus the digital evidence equal a case. But he warned me that without Kyle's testimony, conviction remained unlikely. Everything depended on one traumatized kid's ability to face his abuser in court. The pressure felt crushing. I discovered Ms. Khalifa's Instagram post from 2 years ago through reverse image searching. She tagged herself at her apartment with a timestamp that directly contradicted her sworn affidavit, claiming she had never been alone with Kyle there. The metadata proved the post predated any accusations. Her own social media presence had created the evidence we needed. Kyle's flight landed at 6 in the morning. I picked him up at the airport, shocked by his appearance. He had lost weight, developed nervous tics, aged years and months. We drove in silence to the courthouse. He clutched a folder of additional evidence he had found in Colorado, photos of gifts she had given him, cards with inappropriate messages, physical proof to support the digital trail. The courtroom filled with teachers, parents, and students, everyone forced to pick sides publicly. Lucas sat with Ms. Khalifa's supporters, avoiding eye contact. My family sat behind me, their presence both comfort and a reminder of what this fight had cost. Ms. Khalifa entered looking equally destroyed. Weight loss, trembling hands, dark circles under her eyes. We both paid heavy prices. Kyle took the stand with visible reluctance. His voice shook as he recounted the grooming, the escalation, the confusion of a 12-year-old being told he was special. He described her apartment, details only someone who had been inside would know. The Christmas ornament she kept year-round, the photo of her college boyfriend she had compared him to. Specific, devastating details. The cross-examination felt like watching someone get tortured. Ms. Khalifa's lawyer attacked every inconsistency, every date discrepancy, every moment of confusion. Kyle broke down twice, asking for water, struggling to continue, but he persisted, methodically presenting his evidence, explaining his younger self's inability to understand what was happening. Then Lucas stood up in the gallery. His face had gone pale. He asked to address the court, explaining he had followed me that night months ago, worried about my safety. He had seen Kyle's car at Ms. Khalifa's apartment complex, the same car that should have been at his family's restaurant. He couldn't lie under oath, even if it meant betraying Ms. Khalifa. His testimony shifted everything. The judge ordered a recess. In the hallway, Ms. Khalifa's carefully constructed image finally cracked. She cornered Kyle, begging him to understand their connection, their love story. Security had to physically separate them. Her lawyer tried damage control, but everyone had seen the mask slip. The delusion ran deeper than anyone realized. Digital forensics experts authenticated the chat logs and social media posts. The metadata proved these communications preceded any reports or accusations. Ms. Khalifa's deleted messages were recovered from server backups. Each recovered message added another brick to the wall of evidence. Technology had preserved what she tried to destroy. During her testimony, Ms. Khalifa couldn't maintain her victim narrative. She kept referring to her relationship with Kyle, catching herself mid-sentence, trying to reframe, but the truth leaked through. She genuinely believed they had had something special. The prosecutor let her talk, letting the jury see the delusion, the inability to recognize the power imbalance, the predatory nature of targeting a grieving 12-year-old. The prosecutor asked for my input on sentencing recommendations, prison or mandatory treatment. I thought about Kyle's shattered childhood, his family's forced relocation, the other victims who might never come forward. But I also saw Ms. Khalifa's genuine mental illness. I recommended both treatment within the prison system. She was unwell, but had still chosen to hurt children. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty of sexual abuse of a minor, guilty of abuse of a position of trust, required to register as a sex offender. The judge sentenced her to 8 years with mandatory psychological treatment. Not the maximum, but enough. Kyle collapsed in his mother's arms. Justice felt hollow but necessary. The school board meeting that followed turned into a reckoning. Parents demanded answers about how complaints had been buried. 3 administrators resigned in disgrace. For teachers who had known but stayed silent faced professional reviews. The community split between those who supported the victims and those who had enabled abuse through willful blindness. Ms. Khalifa's apartment was cleared out by her parents. They found journals documenting her obsessions with multiple students over the years. More victims came forward for civil suits. The tutoring center she had started closed within a week. Her teaching license was permanently revoked in multiple states. The systems that had protected her finally turned against her. Kyle flew back to Colorado immediately after testifying. We kept in touch through encrypted messages. He started intensive therapy, slowly processing the trauma. His little sister began speaking to him again after understanding the truth. His family's restaurant reopened in Denver, free from the shadow of scandal. Healing would take years, but it had begun. Some friends returned to my life. Others remained lost forever. Marcus reached out after the verdict, apologizing for abandoning me. But our friendship had fundamentally changed. Trust, once broken, never fully repairs. I learned to accept the permanent damage to some relationships while appreciating those who had eventually seen the truth. My college applications went out late with explanation letters about the gap year I would need. Some schools rejected me based on the controversy. Others saw a student who had fought for justice despite personal cost. I ended up at a state school, not my dream college, but a fresh start. The scandal would always be part of my story, searchable online forever. My brother's friends slowly started coming over again. The whispers faded as new scandals replaced ours. My parents' marriage survived, though the financial strain took years to recover from. We never spoke about that year at family dinners, but the scars remained visible in small ways. In my father's reluctance to trust institutions, in my mother's overprotective hovering. The flash drive that started everything sat in evidence storage, its contents part of permanent court records. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had just deleted it, chosen the easy path. But then I would remember Kyle at 12, trapped and afraid, gathering evidence because no adult would protect him. The choice had never truly been a choice. Other boys from the screenshots came forward privately, sharing their stories with therapists and family. Not all pressed charges, but they found validation in the verdict. Ms. Khalifa's pattern of predation had finally been exposed and stopped. Each boy who found closure was a small victory in a conflict that had cost everyone involved. Mr. Brooks was reinstated after investigation cleared him. His marriage survived, barely. His wife gave birth to a healthy daughter. They sent me a card, not exactly forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Collateral damage in pursuit of justice. Another weight I would carry forever. The retired Principal Edwards passed away 6 months after providing the personnel files. At his funeral, his widow thanked me for giving him the chance to correct an old mistake. He had known something was wrong, but had chosen institutional protection over student safety. His final act had been choosing differently. Ms. Khalifa served 4 years before being released on parole with strict supervision. She moved out of state, required to stay away from schools and minors. Her parents issued a statement about mental health awareness and the importance of early intervention. They never acknowledged the victims directly. I graduated with honors despite missing so much school during the trial. The ceremony felt surreal, walking across the stage in the same auditorium where everything had begun. Some parents still whispered, but I had learned to hold my head high. Survival was its own form of victory. Kyle graduated from his Colorado school as valedictorian. He sent me a photo in his cap and gown, finally looking like a teenager again instead of a haunted child. He had been accepted to an engineering program across the country, a new beginning far from all reminders of the past. We promised to stay in touch, but knew we probably wouldn't. Some bonds are forged in trauma and need distance to heal. Working with a nonprofit supporting abuse survivors became my focus in college. Not as public advocacy or fame-seeking, but quiet support for others navigating similar situations. Every young person who felt heard and believed was a small repayment of the debt I owed Kyle for his bravery. The last time I saw Ms. Khalifa was at a gas station 2 states away, 3 years later. She didn't recognize me at first. When she did, her face crumpled. She looked smaller, older, medicated, a calm replacing her manic energy. We didn't speak. I paid for my gas and left, feeling nothing but tired sadness for the wreckage she had created. My family recovered slowly. Trust rebuilt through small acts and patient love. My brother grew up knowing his older brother had chosen difficult truth over comfortable lies. My parents learned to support without fully understanding. We became closer through shared survival, bonded by weathering the storm together. Kyle sent one final message on the 5th anniversary of Ms. Khalifa's arrest. Just 2 words, thank you. I stared at them for an hour, remembering the terrified kid in his bedroom, surrounded by moving boxes, handing me evidence he had gathered alone. Those 2 words carried the weight of everything we had survived. Looking back, I wouldn't alter my choices. The cost was real. Friendships, reputation, financial security, innocence. But Kyle and others found justice. Ms. Khalifa was stopped. Systems that enabled abuse faced scrutiny. Sometimes doing what is right means accepting permanent scars. I learned to live with mine, knowing they were earned, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves.